Hello and welcome back to my channel. I know that it has been a week. I didn't upload last week and I would like to say it's because I was researching for this video, but it was mainly mental health reasons. I am currently back with my parents at the moment, hence the change of scenery. But I've been researching this and it's something I definitely wanted to talk about the second I read Little Women. And I know I mentioned in the very first video that I did that this is something that I was really interested in. So I am excited because I finally have things to talk about. So I guess let's just dive straight right in. And this video is about the queer icon herself, Jo March.
I just feel like women,
So if you haven't already read Little Women, I'm not going to put a spoiler in here since it's been out since the 1800s and you should know by now. It is about four sisters, Meg, Amy, Beth and Jo, and basically follows them through a year of just being in poverty, being poor, having to deal with like the situation that is among them. Their father is currently in the Civil War and having to fight in that, so it sort of shows their struggle and what they're going through during this year, basically. I would also count this as a Christmas book. This is sort of like, this is like the Die Hard of Christmas books. I think this is a Christmas book. It is set in 2 Christmases and that's enough. That's enough for me. And as I said in the first video that I did, I only gave this a 3 stars. And I think what it was is I just really didn't connect with any of the characters at all. The only interesting thing that I saw was basically Jo progressing through the book. Now, I would like to say that the version that I read here is only the first version. And if you didn't know, that basically modern day copies of Little Women have both the first and the second book combined into one. So it is counted as one book. I haven't read the second part, I just know that all the characters get married off, that sort of thing. I also know that it is a bit controversial with who gets with who and stuff like that, and it has been since the 1800s, like the fandom's still going. A preface for basically, I've read the first half of the book, and I knew that if I didn't like this one, I wasn't going to pick up the second one anyway, especially because a lot of people say that the second one just really wasn't needed. And it also, again, like I said, marries off all of the characters and it makes characters do things that they didn't really want to do and the author didn't want them to do either. So I think that was the reason why I also am not really interested in reading the second half. But I also have watched the Greta Gerwig version of Little Women that came out in 2020. 2019, 2020, it came out in one of those. That's sort of my baseline knowledge of Little Women. And like I said, I did a lot of research for this video though, and I found out a lot of things that sort of make a lot of sense in the end run. I think the first thing I definitely thought when reading this book was that Jo March definitely is queer. So what are the arguments against Jo? A lot of people bring to the table that Jo is very independent and she comes off as a tomboy, and that shouldn't be the characteristic that makes her queer. That's not something that should define her queerness, and it is not. I'd just like to start there. Anyone could be a tomboy. In the arguments against Jo's queerness, it's basically just to say that Jo is basically a independent woman and is against the norms put on women at the time. So as you can tell, in the 1800s, you were sort of expected to marry and expected to have kids and expected to do that, and Jo didn't want to do that. And it's made very clear throughout the book that Jo never wants to do that. So that's a lot of people's reasoning to why Jo isn't queer. She is just a feminist. She just doesn't want that. And I can agree to some extent how this comes across. The writer, Louise May Alcott, basically was the same. She was a radical feminist. She was known for being that. She has stated in many interviews that Jo is a projection of herself. She wrote Jo from herself, basically. So you see a lot of characteristics of Louise May Alcott in Jo. Basically, what I'm saying is her idealistics at the time just seemed, she just wanted to be independent and she, you know, didn't want to conform to society's norms at the time. And great, that's perfect. And I agree with all of those statements, but I don't think that it's far enough. And this is where I feel like it's undeniable that Jo is a queer person. In an 1883 interview, Louisa May Alcott stated, "I am more than half persuaded that I am a man's soul put by some freak of nature into a woman's body, because I've fallen in love with so many pretty girls and never once the least bit with any man." That's pretty fucking gay. I'm not saying, but it's very gay. You're not telling me. She outed herself. This poor woman outed herself, and everyone was like, oh, that's so lovely. Bestie, go besties. But with that in mind, with that quote in mind, we already can get an understanding that Louisa May Alcott may not have been straight. And in that, wanted to be a boy because she had fallen in love with many women and thought that that was a boy's trait. At the time, obviously, gayness wasn't talked about and it wasn't accepted either. So if you thought you were having feelings for the opposite sex, then you were wrong, basically. If you thought you had feelings for the opposite sex, you sort of had to repress yourself and ignore those feelings anyway. So why is that quote important to this? Because this is where it gets interesting. If Jo is a projection of Louisa May Alcott, then her character expresses a lot of times that she wishes that she was a boy. I will talk about later how this could be seen as being trans or being non-binary, and I will talk about how Greta Gerwig also took it into that route. But right now I want to talk about that quote and how it is important to these sentences. If we're going from that quote, like I said, Louisa said that she wished she could be a boy, or she thought she was a boy because she had fallen in love with many girls. Although Jo March doesn't express any love for women in the books, she does express a lot of times that she wished she was male, and she also expresses that she never wishes to marry and that sort of thing, which is very in line with Louisa May Alcott. As this character is literally based from the author's own words, I think that it shows that coming through. So these are the many times that Jo makes a remark about wanting to be a boy. So we have on page 4, I can't get over my disappointment in not being a boy. And you may argue this is because she wants to fight in the war because her father is currently there and she wishes to be there with him. But I would like to say that I can't get over my disappointment in not being a boy, and it's even worse now than ever, for I am dying to go and fight with Papa. So she wanted to be a boy anyway. I saw that this was an argument somewhere else, and it said that, well, no, she wants to be a boy because she wants to go to war with her father. I can't get over my disappointment in not being a boy, and it's worse now that she can't go and fight, basically. No gentlemen were admitted, so Jo played male parts to her heart's content. In the book, the sisters basically put on a show. Jo likes to dress up and play the male parts, which could be down to, you know, gender euphoria. Okay, this is a big one. Page 42. I'm not Miss March, I'm only Jo. I'm not Mr. Lawrence, I'm only Laurie. I hate my name, too. So sentimental. I wish everyone would just say Jo instead of Josephine. How did you make the boys stop calling you Dora? See, this is where I could start going into the trans and non-binary argument, because Jo does not like being referred to as the female version of her name and prefers to be called Jo over anything else. So again, the main point I'm talking about here is the fact that this character is a projection of the author. Louisa May Alcott definitely said some queer things. It's never been officially confirmed, but she never married, she never lived with anyone, she was on her own. I think that quote alone sort of proves it. I'm not here to confirm nor deny her sexuality because she's not here to tell us whether she was or she wasn't. I just think that that quote is very interesting, especially in line with a lot of the things that Jo says. Jo constantly talks about her wish and her need to become a boy. And Louisa May Alcott said that because she fell in love with women and she thought that was a boyish characteristic. She didn't really talk about being queer or being gay back then. So it makes a lot of sense that if she rationalised herself that she thought that she was a male, or she had been put in the wrong body because she didn't understand her feelings but towards females. On top of that, we can talk about the trans or non-binary route that Jo may also be dealing with. I said that quote before that Jo doesn't want to be known as Josephine, she wants to be known as Jo, which is a more masculine version of the name Josephine. And she's upset and gets annoyed when people calls her Josephine. Like, there are a lot of things that sort of add up to say that she could be trans or non-binary, and this is explored in the Greta Gerwig version of Little Women. So Greta Gerwig in an interview basically said that The character Jo March in the film doesn't wear a corset and sometimes doesn't wear a hoop skirt either, which was very traditional and very sort of the basic things that women wore back in the time. And the main reason that Greta Gerwig said that she didn't do this for Jo is so that she could have more boyish moves. So as you can tell in the costume designing and that sort of thing, that was looked at in a queer perspective from Greta Gerwig, and she got that annotation from the book. Greta Gerwig also makes the comment that she thinks that Jo and Laurie find each other before committing to gender. So Greta Gerwig's version was definitely a lot more in-depth when it came to the queer side of the book. Louisa May Alcott took the second book to the publisher and they said they wouldn't publish it unless she made Jo marry, which she wasn't very happy about. Like I said, it is a representation of her. Jo is like a projection of her, and she never wanted to get married and she never wanted Jo to get married either. Everyone asked Jo and Laurie to get married together, and because that everybody asked and because the publishers made her, she brought in another character for Jo to marry, and Laurie married Amy instead. This angered a lot of people, but it was her way of saying, if I don't get my ending, you're not going to get your ending either, which I thought is really good. I give props to her. I give major props to her for that. Like, to make the entire world. Can you imagine if like Tumblr was around in those days? The way she would have been torn to shreds. But this is why I think that Jo is a queer icon as is. I know that this is a bit of a shorter video. I just wanted to talk about it and get my feelings out there. I know I read a lot of articles that basically was like, Jo isn't queer, she's, you know, she's just a feminist and she wants to be independent, and that shouldn't make anyone gay. There was a lot of articles like that. It was a lot. When you connect the dots together and when you look into Louisa May Alcott's life and when you take into consideration how she lived and different quotes that she talked about and things that she said, I think it's clear that not only she but the character Jo are queer. She's not here to talk about her experience and she's not here to confirm nor deny. I think in my eyes that it is pretty clear, as Jo's character is a projection of Louisa May Alcott, and I think that shows in the book, especially with the quotes about wanting to be a man, and especially with her quotes about loving women and thinking she was a man or she was cursed because she wasn't a man. And I think that shows pretty heavily in the book as well. I think it's talked about to such an extent in the book that it's no really denying it. I tabbed all the times that Jo talks about queer instances, and that's a lot of instances for a straight book. Again, this is just a book and you can take whatever you want from it. If you think it is just independence and, you know, not wanting to be part of a heteronormative cycle, that sort of thing, I completely understand it, but I think it is so much deeper than that. But yeah, this is a shorter video than usual. It's one that I've been working on for a couple of days anyway. I again read through this, I tabbed through all the instances that Jo was queer, I did a little bit of research, I watched a couple of really good videos as well that sort of point me in the direction, and yeah, I just wanted to get my thoughts out there. I thought it was the only interesting part of Little Women. I apologise, I know it's like everybody's favourite book and I will get killed for this, but I know it's like everyone's favourite book. But yes, overall, Little Women, it's a fine book. I enjoyed some bits and, you know, other bits were fine. I think that for me the book overall was a little bit boring, but like I said, Jo's character was really good. I really enjoyed her arc and I really enjoyed watching her grow. This book didn't include the second book, so I didn't read When They All Got Married because I think that would have just annoyed me even more, and I'm glad I didn't have to read that bit. But thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry that this is a shorter video than usual. I will be back in my normal setup next week. And it's almost time for January wrap up, which is like come round so fast, but I'm excited to talk about what I've been reading this month as well. So if you're interested in that, please do stick around because I've got lots to talk about for that. But yeah, anyway, that's my little breakdown on Jo March being a queer icon. So like, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff, and I shall see you next time.